what does Christianity offer through Jesus that is different to culture, or that's different to what the world offers? So let's have a look at some of the answers you've put in the Slido, because I think to answer this question, we need to know what the world offers, right? It's silly to try and answer what does Jesus offer that the world doesn't if we don't even know what the world is offering. So we'll have a look at some of these. I've seen the 2-1 a couple of times on there. There's good relationships, fulfillment, so we're going to cover some of that. Community, be happy. So I suppose that you could characterize some of these things into success metrics. So I'm going to do this grade. Because of that, it's going to allow me to do this with my life. And then you could also characterize some of them into relationship, love, or happiness. So we're going to cover some of those things in the talk today. I'm not going to be able to cover everything, so I don't have loads of time. But yeah, if we go on to the next slide. What I really want to do is go through some of these things one by one. And you might think that the structure of this talk is going to be, oh, the world promises you all these things, but you don't really want those things. You want Jesus instead. But that's not really what I want to do. I want to say, actually, these things that you want, that the world is offering, it doesn't actually give it to you. It's almost like when you try and grasp it, it disappears from your fingers when you actually obtain it. But Jesus is able to give you these things that on the most basic level you do want, even though you're not searching for them directly, you're coming to them through Jesus. So hopefully that will make a bit more sense as we go through. But I want to start off with some of the more material success points. Now, I don't think there's loads of people that genuinely believe that these are things which are ultimately satisfying, but I certainly have met some people that do think that. And it may at least be something that's subconsciously in your mind as you're at university. You might not say, well, getting this grade and getting this job is what's going to make me happy. But you might be acting in such a way that no one will be able to tell any different that that's what you're building your life on. Do you see what I mean? If you're putting all of your eggs into the basket of your university grade and then your job prospects moving from there, then surely some outsider could very easily say, yeah, this is what you're ultimately hoping is going to satisfy you. And the question is it? And before we even get to the Bible, I think there are some good statistics that show us that this isn't the case. So let's take fame as the first example. This is an interesting study showing that suicide rates are 4 times higher among pop stars. And I actually don't think this is that surprising. I think we know that this is the case. I think we could all name probably a few celebrities that are just evidently not happy. And yet for some reason, a lot of people do pursue fame with the kind of misguided notion that it is going to satisfy. And then there's money as well. Again, very interesting study a while ago in America showing that there's no link between your annual income and your emotional well-being beyond $75,000 a year. So pursuing these kind of vast amounts of wealth, there's just no correlation to your level of life satisfaction. And actually, when you get to really high levels and those celebrity levels, then it actually drops off. So it seems like people are trying to pursue these things, and like I was saying before, as they actually obtain them, they're realizing that they're not what they were promised to be. So maybe the world is offering satisfaction through these things, but it's not giving it. So maybe the world is able to give you the money. You know, there are people that can earn a lot of money, and maybe it is able to give you the fame, but it isn't able to give you the reason that you wanted the money and the fame. And then there's the idea of winning and competition. You could apply this to lots of different contexts, but I want to give an example of this one with Adam Peaty. So if we go on to the next slide. This is one that, again, I resonate with quite a lot. So I love sports, I'm a long distance runner, and I love winning. And again, I think consciously, I would never say I build my life on winning. But subconsciously, if you look at the way at certain points in my life that I've trained for certain races and events, anyone would probably say, wow, it seems to me like this is the biggest thing that you care about in the world. And it's silly because it's not satisfying. But let's go to Adam Peaty's story. So put your hands up if you've heard of Adam Peaty before. You know who he is? Okay, I'd say that's just over half. Yeah, he's super famous British swimmer, 50 and 100 meter breaststroke. And yeah, he set 14 world records in those 2 events, 3 gold medals, over the 2 Olympics leading up to Paris. And so as he enters the Paris 2024 Olympics, of course he's odds on to get a gold medal. But it's interesting, if you watch back some of his interviews in the years leading up to that, there does seem to be a palpable level of dissatisfaction with his winnings, despite the fact that he was so successful. Anyway, he turns up at Paris 2024 and he loses out on the gold medal by 0.02 seconds. And he gets silver. And obviously then you're thinking, what on earth is he going to say in the interview afterwards? You're expecting to see a distraught man. And yet, if we go on to the next slide, what he actually said in that interview is, the one before, sorry. In my heart, I have already won. Now people are thinking, what is this guy talking about in his interview? Well, Adam Peaty had become a Christian. And so, for him, he'd realised that actually winning wasn't the be-all and end-all. And it certainly wasn't the most satisfying thing to build your life on. He had such a successful career, and yet he realised that there are things that are much more important than that. And for him, he was able to smile off the back of that silver, knowing that his relationship with Jesus was like he had already won. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. Now, this is now bringing in what the Bible has to say about whether success satisfies. We've seen some stats and we've heard some stories, but I want to let the Bible speak on this issue as well. So this is what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6 in his Sermon on the Mount. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I just want to note 2 things very quickly about this. The first thing is, this is talking about heaven, isn't it? This saying, you might be trying to obtain all kinds of things in this life, but those things are transitory. That's both true in the sense that you might have things that rust and break, but I think it's also true in the sense that, as I said before, when you actually get these things that you think you want, you realise that they're not what you thought they were. And so in that sense, perhaps metaphorically, they're kind of breaking and disappearing even as you think you're getting them. And what Jesus is obviously saying here is that with heaven, this is not the case. Things don't rust and destroy in heaven. But then the other thing I want to notice is with Adam Peaty, it wasn't just the case that he was looking forward to heaven, but life kind of sucks now. It seems to be the case that Adam Peaty had found a satisfaction that was for now as well, even as he went through life, and it was also something he was looking forward to in the future. And this is something that any Christian can testify to. Yes, we're looking forward to heaven, but life now is also dramatically changed by being in a relationship with Jesus. So now we're starting to get to that point I made earlier about the world offers these things, but then actually with Jesus, you can have these things indirectly through that relationship with Jesus. So the idea of success, why is there any greater success than what is being described here? To be in heaven with God eternally, in a relationship with Him, but then also on this earth to have, let's say, a relationship which is partial. The Bible describes it as like seeing in a mirror dimly, but then in heaven we'll be see face to face. That relationship, you could say, is success if what you're aiming for is satisfaction. Let's go on to the next slide. Now, I don't think there are many people who really think that success or that any of these metrics do satisfy. But I think there's an awful lot of people that think love is what satisfies. All you need is love, as we've heard from the Beatles. Now, why is that? I think love is a much more compelling candidate for ultimate satisfaction, right? It seems a lot more plausible that if you just build your life on love, then you'll really be satisfied and there's nothing better that you could do with your life. Now, love is definitely something that the world offers. It offers it in a variety of different ways. One thing is the world says to love yourself. I never quite understand what that means. There's also a message of love is following your desires whatever they may be. But the Bible has a slightly different picture of love. The Bible's picture of love is action that puts someone else before yourself. And I think the reason why human beings are so compelled towards love is actually because we were made in the image of God, and God describes himself as love. So when you ask people, what's the best candidate for something to build your life on, and they say love, I think that's because the God who created us made us that way. He wired us to function for love and for relationship because he made us in his image. And God, in his very nature, is love. So what do I mean by that? Well, even before God created the world, the Christian God is Trinity. So there's three persons in one God. There's love between the Father, the Son, and the Spirit that exists even before the world begins. And so you see that there's love and relationship at the very heart of God. And then that love that he has for us, that is shown in creation, but then he's shown it much more dramatically at the cross, which is where God's Son, Jesus, comes into the world to die, so that people who have done wrong things can be restored to relationship with God through what he's done on the cross. That love is what each one of us desires. It's built into our DNA that we want love and we're compelled towards love. But what I would say is, though love does seem a very compelling candidate for something to build your life on, each one of us has a God-shaped hole in our hearts that cannot be filled by anything else, not even by love of a purely human relationship. Again, if we're saying that the reason that we love is because we've been built this way by God, how can you expect to find true satisfaction and fulfillment, even in something like love, if you're not connected to the God who made you that way in the first place? The Bible says there in 1 John 4, we love because he first loved us. So of course you can follow the many different definitions that the world gives for what love is and how to obtain it. But ultimately, the Bible is claiming there that you can't have this true love, you can't give it, and you certainly can't receive it if you're not in a relationship with God. And that's where Jesus is offering something that the world definitely doesn't offer. So what does Jesus offer that the world doesn't? I suppose the way I want to answer the question is, Jesus offers relationship with God, and relationship with God gives you all the things that the world promises but can't fulfill. So let me try and explain that as we draw to a close. How does Jesus give us relationship with God? I just mentioned it briefly. We have all done wrong things. God is holy and perfect, so we can't have a relationship with God in our sinful state. Sin is just all the wrong things that we do. However, God sending Jesus into the world to die for our sins, for anyone who believes in him, repents, that means turns away from all the wrong things that they've done. Anyone who accepts what Jesus did on that cross for them can have a relationship with God. Why? Because every wrong thing that they've done has been punished by Jesus instead. And so Jesus is then offering relationship with God that the world can't offer, because how can you connect to God without coming through Jesus? Otherwise you'll be in your state of wickedness, and God can't bear to be in the presence of that. But then what do I mean that having this relationship with God gives you all these other things? Well, we've seen that ultimately it gives you heaven. That means eternal relationship with God, God being the source of all things that are good and all things that are love. But then also in this life it gives you that satisfaction that comes from first loving God, secondly loving the people around you, being loved by God, being loved by the people around you, and then finally considering yourself. So these things that you might try and obtain directly, whether it be success, whether it be happiness, pleasure, or even love, when you try and go for them head on, you miss the mark, or at least you find that what the world promised to give you those things, it doesn't give you them at all. But when you go through Jesus and you say, no, I'm going to serve Jesus first and not myself, then what you find is that yourself you receive these things as well as the relationship.